Harry, you're the rideshare guy. Tesla's preparing to move into the rideshare market, your market. What do you think?
I've been waiting for this day for a long time. I've been waiting for Elon to give me a call and let me know that he needs my services. So I'm here. I'm ready. Let's do this.
Is he going to read your book? Are you going to send him a copy?
That's actually, I kind of like that idea. I might send, I'm not even kidding. I might send, now that you mentioned it, I might send Elon a copy of my book with a little handwritten note that says, with my phone number, call me if you need anything. Because I will say, obviously Elon has been a controversial figure over the past few years, especially. But I've always been a big fan of Tesla and EV in general. I think my first new car I ever got was a Model 3. And then I had a couple kids and got the Model Y. And, I'm coming up on my 5-year anniversary with my Model Y. And so over the past 3 to 5 years, when this electrification push really happened and started crossing over with rideshare, I sort of knew my day would come where people in the EV industry, like I'm no expert in EVs, but, I sort of knew that eventually, if I stick it out long enough, people like Elon will eventually have to come knocking on my door, maybe for help, maybe to give me some money, maybe for something, or just to throw memes at me on Twitter. But we'll see. I'm here. I'm ready.
Never know. Other car brands knocked on your door over the years. Well, we had beers or drinks or whatever the heck we had, and you got to deal with Ford. So you made a video for Ford. Maybe you could make a video for Tesla.
Yeah, no, we've done a lot of campaigns over the years with OEMs. And then honestly, there really is no stronger use case for EVs than rideshare drivers who are putting 1,000 to 2,000 miles a week on their car. When you think about like the maintenance, when you think about obviously the gas savings, right? When you just think about the quality of the ride, would you rather get into a Tesla Model 3 or a Toyota Corolla or a Toyota Camry? I think most people would opt for the Tesla. It's fun to drive for the drivers. Just all of these areas that you can kind of arbitrage, that you have such a faster break-even point, right? Because drivers are putting so many, it's better for the environment, right? Just everything about EVs is such a good use case. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see so many Tesla Model 3s now out there on Uber.
It's incredible. I count Teslas. I don't drive very far. I see on average 20 a day. Mostly threes and Ys. You've got a 3, you've got a Y. Have you put it on FSD 12 yet?
Yeah, no, I've got full self-driving. I had a 3, now I have the Y.
Oh, you're missing the S and the E and the X, and you'd be sexy.
Yeah, well, we want to have one more kid, so I think maybe might have to get a Model X, or I've been looking at Rivian too. So I love Tesla, but hey, I'll go wherever the best and most interesting cars are being made. So I think that, yeah, definitely some good options out there with Tesla.
Have you driven FSD 12 yet?
I've had full self-driving on my car for a couple years now, and I definitely, I think, since I've had Tesla for so long, I had autopilot 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago whenever they launched it, and it was amazing. It was like, wow, this is really impressive. And not knowing anything about Tesla, it seemed like over the past 5 years, the autopilot product just stayed the same. Like everyone else was moving forward, and autopilot was sort of like all it could do was just keep you in the lane. And whenever I had it on, my wife would always complain, oh my God, this car drives way too jerky and not like a real person. It's great when you're driving from LA to Mammoth on a 5-hour drive on a 2-lane highway and there's no traffic or anything like that. It's awesome. But the quality I feel like kind of was really just not that great after the initial buzz wore off. And I think it kind of makes sense, right? Because obviously they've been focusing so much on full self-driving. So for the past few years, I'm guessing, like without knowing anything about Tesla, like just from a business perspective, I think it would make sense to shift resources toward this big new fancy product because they want to launch Robotaxis. And I will say, I don't know that I saw a step function change with FSD 12, but I definitely will say, as someone who's used full self-driving in my own car for the past 2 or 3 years, however long it's been out, or 1 or 2 years, it definitely is slowly to medium getting better. Like I kind of just noticed the past few months, I'm like, oh, this car actually can merge into traffic here and there, and it's a little smoother ride. And it's very rare that, it's definitely not perfect. It's very rare that I have to take over because it's going to crash or do something weird. It's more like, I could go a little faster or stop changing lanes. It's more like the nitpicky stuff right now that probably because I'm so jaded from using it for so long that I think is like the final few steps.
Can you merge on to Wilshire, Olympic, or Sunset during rush hour yet?
I'm no expert in the technology or full self-driving or even cars, but I think a lot of the success I've had over the past 10 years covering the rideshare industry is not from being an expert, just like going out and trying it, like just doing it, using full self-driving and like that exact use case. I feel like to me, it's like very close on mastering the like grandma driving. Like it can almost drive like your grandma 100%. So that's the first category. And then the next one would be like LA driving. driving. Hey, merging in rush hour, like waiting left turn, being super aggressive, kind of driving like you have to. Even if you're not an aggressive driver, there are times you have to like get in there and merge. And if you can't, like you might just get stuck or sit there. I feel like that's going to be a tricky one. And then the third one would be like knocking out all those super weird or random edge cases that I'm not an expert in, when there's some squirrel gets in the middle of the road or a deer, like all the like 1 in 10 million kind of use cases that like, hey, if there's no driver in the car, like you have to account for like the 1 in a million or 1 in 10 million. Tesla, especially, I think the thing that from working in tech, when these companies are operating at scale, Uber is doing millions of trips a day. If there's a 1 in a million chance of dying in an Uber, 8 people are going to die riding Uber today. That's pretty crazy. You know what I mean? 1 in a million, that'll never happen to me. And I don't think that's the odds, but if it is that type of chance, the numbers at scale really are massive. And so I think Tesla is definitely in that category with so many Model 3s and Ys on the road and so many people doing full self-driving and all that, those edge cases, those 1 in 10 million edge cases might happen once a day or two.
Before we get to Tesla and the Cybercab, we still have FSD 12.6 today. You talk to a lot of Uber drivers, you survey Uber drivers, you're actually an Uber driver yourself, because you ate your own dog food, use the Google analogy. Are there any restrictions of using FSD while ferrying passengers in an Uber today?
I don't believe that there are any policy restrictions from Uber. I think the general practice that if I was advising an Uber driver or if I was doing it, I probably wouldn't use full self-driving, just driving around here and there. If we had a long drive from, let's say, LA to Orange County, I would probably put it on the freeway and not say anything to the rider. If they asked, I would, of course, mention it. And in my head, I would probably have a good explanation for it. Like, oh yeah, I use full self-driving when it's like a long 1-hour drive down the road, something like that, that kind of reassures them or makes them feel safer because, yeah, you know, it is a little bit of a gray area.
Waymo's operating in LA, so we're going to potentially get a Tesla Cybercab. We'll have Waymo. At some point, perhaps you get Cruise. What's the reaction been from the rideshare community of the Waymos currently operating in and around LA?
I think Waymo just announced that they were doing 50,000 trips per week. I believe in Los Angeles was the number they shared. And what's funny is that the AV hype cycle has sort of come and gone, I think twice now. That first initial wave might have been when Uber and all these other companies were investing in ATG. It's like deja vu for me. Like, oh, I've talked about this like 5 years ago, you know? And like not a lot has changed. Like the driver reaction, like it's still, I think the big difference with Waymo is that they are actually like out there giving rides right now with no safety driver in the front seat, right? And so to me, those are actual robotaxi rides. I don't care if it's a limited geography or if being extremely subsidized by Google, because obviously if you're sitting in the back of a $75,000 Jaguar I-Pace and you have $200,000 to $300,000 of LiDAR equipment on top and you're paying the same amount as an Uber, obviously someone's paying for that delta, right? That's not the true cost of the ride, duh. But I think the reaction from drivers is definitely one more, I wouldn't even say skepticism, but yeah, rideshare, Uber and Lyft drivers are not fans of self-driving cars, right? I think there's definitely the strong feeling that, hey, they're going to take my job. And I think this is a little bit of the inherent tension that drivers and Uber and platforms really have always had. I, as an individual driver, I want as few drivers on the road as possible. I want as high of surge pricing as possible. I want you, Grayson, if you're going to the bar on Friday night to have a good time, I want to charge you as much as you're willing to pay because I get to make most of that money. Well, usually, sometimes drivers complain about Uber's take rate, or not sometimes, that is a big complaint that drivers have. But for the most part, that's what I want on an individual basis. I don't care if you go out and have a bad experience on Uber and have to pay a lot, and maybe in the future you take less rides because I'm never going to see you again. Uber is thinking about the platform and drivers are thinking about it selfishly. Like we tell drivers, be selfish, literally like do what's best for yourself. And that is what's in the moment is better for the individual driver versus Uber is thinking more about the longer term, the lifetime value of a customer, all of those kind of fancy tech buzzwords. And so I think that's kind of the issue at stake, that when it comes to self-driving cars, me as an individual Uber driver, I see a Waymo down the road. It's like, oh, seems like they're going to take rides away from me. Realistically, I think the last chapter of my book that I'm going to send to Elon, the Rideshare Guide, I talk about, luckily my editor made me put this section in, I talk about like how will robotaxis affect Uber and Lyft drivers. And I think definitely initially with Waymo, for example, it's going to be a hybrid. If you imagine like right now, Waymo has vehicles on the road. I can't go certain places with Waymo. Maybe the rides, if they ever start charging, maybe it's more of a premium service or a premium offering. Maybe they can't park and drop off as aggressively. Maybe they don't drive as aggressively. They actually do not drive as aggressively as Uber and Lyft drivers right now. So if I'm in a rush on the way to the airport, I'm not calling a Waymo, I'm calling an Uber, right? I want to get some grizzled veteran who's done 25,000 trips and is like, hey, drop me off up top. Some Uber drivers will drop you off top or bottom or whatever, has less traffic. So I think that if you look at the detail, like it almost has to be a hybrid fleet going forward, at least in like the near to intermediate future.
The hybrid gives Uber a competitive advantage. I'd say Waymo in LA, you can't go north of Sunset. You can't even go to the Beverly Hills Hotel. You can't go to my favorite place. You can't go to the Hotel Bel Air. You just can't do it. That's a shame.
Can't go to the Polo Lounge, huh?
No, can't go to the Polo Lounge. Can't do it. You want to talk about inflation? Let's talk about inflation for a minute. I read a really fascinating interview with Michael Douglas, the actor in the Financial Times, where they had lunch with the FT. Michael Douglas and the FT columnist went to the Polo Lounge for breakfast. 2 breakfasts, 1 alcoholic drink each. $400. You want to talk about inflation? The Polo Lounge has got inflation cooking. Bidenomics is working at the Polo Lounge. Inflation's going up, but I digress.
The nice thing about the people eating at the Polo Lounge is they can probably afford it. I think the Uber drivers that are seeing 30% spike in insurance, and honestly, a lot of the categories that have been hardest hit by inflation are core to an Uber and Lyft driver. Gas obviously has fluctuated but gone up. I wouldn't say that people are underestimating the challenge of running and operating a fleet, but this is like an extremely tough business to run a fleet. And then once you scale, your mistakes are magnified. If you've got 1 million cars out on the road and you screw depreciation up, kind of like how Hertz did, for example, I think was the story, that they didn't quite calculate the correct depreciation on these Tesla Model 3s, and probably didn't help that Tesla was slashing all the prices. Now, you didn't just make a mistake with one car, you made it with 1 million cars. And not to just throw Hertz under the bus, Uber did this too. They had this program called Uber Exchange Leasing, where they were financing vehicles for Uber and Lyft drivers. And I believe it was a $900 million reported loss on this program because they completely underestimated the fact that people are going to drive the hell out of these cars. They're going to crash a lot. So I think these key assumptions, the average car price is $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, right? So it's a very expensive asset. And when you move into EVs and when you move into AVs, that CapEx only increases not 10, 20%, maybe 2, 3x. And so I think to me, that is another area where this isn't rocket science. Like they're going to figure it out, any solid AV company, but this is a challenging business to run and operate a fleet at scale. And I think that's one of the things that Uber has a huge advantage of. They do not own a fleet. They have variable supply. When I first started driving for Uber and Lyft, I would not go out on a Saturday night if I could not make more money through surge pricing. They got me onto the road. They enabled supply at its peak time and they don't have to pay for the downtime, right? That's the challenge that Waymo has. If they were to operate on their own, do they want to build to peak Saturday, Friday night? Sure, demand peaks Friday, Saturday nights, and then Monday through Friday rush hours, people going to and from work. Obviously, if they have too many cars Saturday, Friday night, or enough cars Friday, Saturday night, they're going to have way too many during Tuesday afternoon. And that's why there are only 13,000 taxis in New York City. And now there's 150,000 Uber and Lyft drivers because the taxi companies were like, hey, let's build to average. And then Friday, Saturday night, if you can't get home, that's on you. Who cares? You know what I mean? Like we got to stay busy all the time. And so I think that's why I talked about like the model of rideshare really lends itself to this hybrid. You have to have, not have to, but like to be a very successful company like Uber is, that concept of variable supply is really valuable. I actually see Waymo fitting into Uber really, really well because they have such high demand and density. Waymo could put all these restrictions. Hey, you can only ride with 2 people. You can only be going certain places. If Uber's doing 8 million trips a day, maybe 1 million of those potential trips fall into Waymo. And if you can't get a Waymo, you opt for an Uber. You can let passengers select, hey, do you want a Waymo or do you want a human? If you want to prefer a Waymo over a human, you can kind of go into all these iterations and like plug and play. So I don't see any other way how Waymo would be able to operate at scale on its own. I almost feel like they absolutely have to plug into Uber as a fleet partner or operator. And I think it'll be a pretty good partnership and I think they'll be very successful, but I can only see them being a fraction of what Uber is when you think about long-term value and things like that.
Waymo has the partnership with Uber today in the Phoenix metro region. I've been studying a lot about personal auto insurance. It's scary. On average, it's up 26% year over year. It's forecasted to go up another 7% this year. The average American across the board is paying anywhere from $2,500 to $3,200 for auto insurance. I was speaking to a trucking executive yesterday, and the individual said to me, remember the gas surcharge? Yeah, I remember that. He goes, no. The insurance surcharge is coming. we got to pass on the costs of insurance, because on the trucking side, you have the nuclear verdicts, and obviously on the passenger side, you either have issues, and I saw the big news out of California where you're based, State Farm's pulling out of the state. So you're going to have less supply to go around. What's going to happen to the drivers with rising insurance costs? And does that open the door for robotaxis, because you're not going to subsidize the insurance, because if you look at Waymo, they're self-insured and they're reinsured through Swiss Re. They're not paying that active cost.
That's a good point. And this is another area where, again, I'm no expert at insurance, but it's such an important part of running a fleet, is that I feel like I probably know a lot more than one might expect. And I think you mentioned personal insurance costs are up 26 or close to 30%. And drivers do need personal insurance. Sure, Uber and Lyft drivers do need personal insurance to drive for Uber and Lyft. And so they do bear that cost. And then Uber and Lyft provide commercial insurance while you are on a trip or basically en route to a passenger. So that's the good $1 million liability policy. And they've got a collision coverage. There is a high deductible of $2,500. But even those costs, those platform costs for rideshare companies, are up more than 30%. Uber announced to us, and we covered this about a year ago, I want to say, that their commercial insurance costs in places like Los Angeles, one of their biggest markets, and a bunch of cities, had gone up 40%. And so drivers are very aware of this, because Uber breaks down what the customer pays and then all the external fees. And there's a big category that Uber and Lyft, I think, both call external fees, but it's basically insurance. And, we used to see $6. I mean, it used to be $1 or $2 fee, and then we would see $6, the occasional $8 or $10. And now we've seen on a single ride where insurance costs $14, $20. Insurance is really skyrocketed in certain markets. And I believe Dara touched on this on a recent earnings call. I think what he said I agreed with is one big reason is that they get sued a lot. Uber, have you ever gone to the airport? You seen all these billboards like injured in an Uber accident, call the rideshare amigo. It might be a trademark violation, by the way, with Rideshare Guy. I don't know. I've talked to him about that. But there's a lot of these Uber and Lyft lawyers that are going after these companies. There are also, frankly, Uber and Lyft drivers are not good drivers. They're driving during dangerous times, Friday, Saturday night, party hours, Monday through Friday, rush hour, and the times, busy times when there is a lot of traffic, and in areas that obviously a lot of insurance is dictated by zip codes. So they're in a lot of these areas that have higher insurance costs, and then they're incentivized to drive fast. Literally, if I'm an Uber driver and I see a yellow light, what should I do? I'm going to speed through that, because now I can get my passenger to my destination quicker. Or if I'm driving to a passenger, I get to my destination quicker, and I do more trips per hour, and that dictates my earnings per hour. And so I can make more money by literally driving faster, less safe. And so that, I think, is kind of a little bit of a perverse incentive. Uber actually does not reward me directly as a driver. I think they're working on a lot of programs and pilots, and they should do this, but they don't reward me for being a safe driver right now, which is oh my gosh, everyone's oh my gosh, insurance costs are up. And to me, it's, well, duh. You're literally telling me indirectly as a driver to go out there, drive the craziest times, the most expensive times, drive crazy. And then on the EV side too, we know that there's a lot of data now that driving an EV, these things have a lot of power. And so people that are in EVs are getting into more accidents maybe than normal, especially when I first got my Tesla Model 3, I almost hit 3 cars right within the first month. So it's definitely, these things have a lot of power. You drive a little crazier, you drive a little faster. And so I think on the insurance side, that's kind of why a lot of these costs are up, they're rising. And I think to answer, I kind of wanted to give that background before I answered your question, because honestly, I don't know. I think it's a really good question. I'm going to answer off the cuff right now. I haven't really thought about it, but I kind of imagine that, yes, robo-taxis should, in theory, be a lot safer. That's the whole point of them. They're not going to be looking at their phone. They're not going to be hard braking. Hard braking is one of the leading indicators of accidents. You slam on the brakes, someone rear ends you. Kind of makes sense. They shouldn't do that. So I think there might be some less insurance risk there, but I think they might get sued just as much. People hit them, or when they do hit something, obviously you're driving in a dense population. There's going to be accidents. They're going to be targets for lawsuits, whether they're at fault or not. So I guess maybe if I had to guess, maybe there's 40% or 30% less insurance costs with robo-taxis.
It's going to be cheaper because it's self-insured, so you not have to deal with the personal auto market. I don't know the economics to quote you here on what the reinsurance market are, but I do know that there is more capacity than there is in the personal lines market today. Tesla's going into your market, the rideshare market. We were talking offline. We both agree that they're only going to start this when they have the cybercab, and I'm not going to give a time frame. I guarantee it's not going to be 25 or 26.
Well, whatever Elon said, multiply it by 5 or 6.
We're probably closer to 30, maybe 32. In the meantime, you brought up a really interesting point. So a driver there, traditional Uber Lyft drivers, out of yellow light, floor it, Okay, there we go. What if Tesla introduced a service with human drivers because they've got all that insurance data with the driver score, and they also have their own insurance company in 16 of the 50 states. They can drive down that cost and gain significant market share there. And I asked that because I was at the airport last week. I pull out the Uber app. It says $140 to come home. I said, I caramba, not doing that. So I dust off the old app store. I open up Lyft, $70. Okay, score. I hopped in the Lyft for 50% cheaper. Does the Tesla become the new Lyft app where it's that second afterthought? Oh, it's cheaper. I'm going to go in this. Does that fit anywhere there?
There is definitely a ton of variability in really the rideshare industry, period. Whether it look, I just posted a screenshot of a driver who's making $45 an hour in the Newark area before his expenses, and the city average is $15 or $16 an hour. He's literally earning 3x. And I don't think he's doing anything. He's obviously got some strategy he's using. That's what my whole site is about, but it's not rocket science. It's not anything special. On the customer side, we see a ton of pricing variability. This is one of the reasons why I started shout out to one of the companies that I'm an advisor for called Obi. They help you compare prices between Uber and Lyft, and then they have a data portal in the back where they let rideshare platforms basically look into their pricing API. Like, hey, if Uber is charging $140 and I'm Lyft, I don't need to charge $70 to get you to take Lyft. I should be charging $120. I just left $50 a margin. You would have taken Lyft if it was $20 cheaper, maybe $5, $10, maybe it's about the same. But what's that threshold where you would take it where it's cheaper? Like 70, obviously, but there's probably some margin they're leaving on the table. So that's like the type of projects and data that we're working on there. I think as far as Tesla launching a rideshare company with human drivers, my gut doesn't seem like a great idea, but I think that I could see it being an interesting kind of pathway. There is this huge community of Tesla evangelists. And right now, it's a lot of people driving for Uber, or they want to drive for Uber and they get into a Tesla. They rent one from Hertz, or they go and find one from a vehicle provider, a fleet rental company that does a week-to-week rental for Uber drivers. I think that no one's really tapped into the Tesla fan community, where obviously there's millions of these Teslas on the road. I bet a lot of them would want to drive for Tesla rideshare. You know what I mean? They might not want to drive for Uber. Maybe they do, but I bet if Tesla started a rideshare company and their whole pitch was, do you own a Tesla? Make some money driving other people around, help spread the Tesla message, show them how full self-driving works. I think that would be the unique pitch. But as far as the actual rideshare company, it's a slog. It's a grind. I just tweeted about this the other day. Uber is literally at peak pricing. They're charging the most they've ever charged. They are literally paying drivers. Their take rate is as high as it's ever been, and they're still losing money. I think they had a big on paper loss of 670 million, but even without that, they still only made $50 million last quarter. And I'm I don't understand. How are these guys not making more money? They literally can charge as much as they want. People have to get a ride home, and the take rate that they're paying to drivers is on up and up and up, right? Because there's so many drivers out on the road right now. Supply is at an all-time high, and Uber is only making tens of millions of dollars a quarter, basically, last quarter. So I think it kind of just highlights there's a lot going on. There's a lot behind the scenes. There's insurance, there's lawsuits. I don't know every little detail, but I guess to me, if I'm Tesla, I would think about less where do I have a little bit of an advantage? Maybe I could launch a rideshare company with humans, and more, where do I have 100x potential advantage? And I think that that's the self-driving, the robotaxi part with Teslas, where they actually kind of line up a lot more with Uber, with the variable supply, than I think Waymo does. So I think that's interesting, and maybe what you had me on to talk about.
It's very interesting. I think about Tesla. Even before Cybercab, Tesla's going to crack FSD. It's only a matter of time. The Sensor Suite could change. It could not change. Not going to give an opinion on that, but they are going to crack it at some point. Not going to give a timeline. When they do crack it, because I truly believe they will crack it, let's just use simple math. You're paying $400 a month. I had Pete Bigelow on from Automotive News the other day, and we talked about the Tesla subscription, where Tesla no longer sells your vehicle. You subscribe to it. Includes your charging, includes your FSD, and most importantly, it includes your insurance. Let's just round it up, $400, $500. And then you can then put that out on a network and make money on it. Okay, so you're making $700 a month. You're net $200. That's a game changer for individuals, because this inflation is not going down. Consumers are suffering, and they're trying to find a way to make money. It seems that Tesla's the only one that could do it because of the brand. The consumer loves the brand.
There's definitely something about the Tesla brand that I think a lot of people overlook. I remember when I went to Mexico City, there was a company called Beat. They're a big rideshare company in LATAM, and one of their products that they offered was called Beat Tesla. And as the name would imply, it was only a fleet of Tesla Model 3s. I think I interviewed their general manager after I got back, but they had 100 or 200 cars. And typically with Uber, the number one KPI they care about is reliability. When you open the Uber app, is there a car 3 to 5 minute ETA. They don't care about surge pricing and what you're paying. The whole point of surge pricing is so that when you open the app, they would rather you see a car 3 to 5 minutes away and have to pay $1,000 than no cars and normal pricing of 100. And so once you understand that is their literal number one KPI, that's why so many of these other providers struggle, like Waymo. How do they get to that parity in that respect? Beat Tesla, though. The one thing I found really interesting when I was riding that service, it was almost like a cool club. If you couldn't get a ride, it was kind of on you, like, hey, you didn't get a Tesla. You got to go take their regular car. You got to get like this crappy Toyota Yaris or whatever the hell they ride in Mexico City, like some off-brand Toyota. It was almost like, I think there's something about the Tesla brand where they can command different experience where it's like, hey, the hot restaurants where you didn't get a reservation, you don't get mad at the restaurant. You're like, damn it, I want that even more now. And so I think that's what Tesla, I don't know how, forcefully, but they've definitely have the potential to lean into. And that Tesla brand, I think, is so strong. So I can't remember the original question, but that was that kind of observation always stuck out with me when I think about Tesla and rideshare.
It's a consistent product. It truly is. Morgan Freeman invested in a livery company.
I think your point was right. Like you were talking about the all-in cost of the 500. Let's say a Tesla Model 3 is $40,000 now. I think typically, right, that would be like around a $400 a month kind of finance or lease. I think the cost would, these things are not cheap, right? They're still, let's say it's minimum $400 a month plus insurance and anything else. Like you can rent a Tesla Model 3 from Hertz with unlimited mileage week to week. And it's quite expensive. It's actually closer to like $450 a week. And that's a different product than a traditional lease because these guys are going to go out and drive 1,000 to 2,000 miles a week on the car. So there's a lot of depreciation. There's a lot more maintenance. You're literally doing 4 to 5x the average. And that's probably why it costs 4 to 5x the more traditional lease or financing. But so I don't know that it would be super cheap, but like I think your point stands that like if people could go get a Tesla and then put it on the network, all the stats, I think I did a LinkedIn post the other day, 90% of time cars are sitting there unused, parked. And so I think it definitely, on paper at least makes sense that like, I think it could open up like to a lot of people that maybe honestly like a Tesla Robotaxi network, like I think it would work pretty well, like, hey, I drive my Tesla and then when I'm not, I put it on the network. Like Uber has a feature right now for drivers called Destination Filter. And basically what it lets you do is you can get trips headed in only a certain direction. Lyft has a feature where you can put a time bound on it, right? So you could say, hey, or even Uber too, like I need to be at this place by 2 p.m. Imagine you had a Robotaxi. It's the same technical product. You say, I'm going to go out there, let Tesla put my car on the network. It can do rides until 2 p.m. I need the car back at 2 p.m. So it'll go and find rides wherever, far, short, left, east, west, north, south, you don't care, but it knows that it has to get a ride like back to you at 2 p.m. So it'll make that happen. And Uber literally already has that product right now for drivers. So technically, I think the synergies would definitely be there.
They are there. And I want to highlight something to you. And I'm going to quote this. This is from Uber's Q1 2024 earnings call. This is a direct quote from Dara. End quote. And over a period of time, you'll see the kind of penetration of AVs increase. I think it's very difficult to predict that time period, but really, what we bring is the systems that we put in place, the pricing, matching, routing algorithms, the payments systems that we have on a global basis, as well as the demand that we bring that enables us to partner with these AV providers to really drive utilization of their assets. This is a very expensive tech that's been developed over a long time. And if you're an AV fleet owner, or you're an individual owner of a car, whether that's a Tesla or any other kind of car, you're just going to make more money and make higher kind of return on your investment if you plug your AVs into the Uber ecosystem, into Uber demand. So we think that we bring lots to the table. We're looking to partner with the AV industry. I do think that there's a good amount of excitement over some of the newer technologies and kind of the imitation models that we've seen in terms of AV. And you see that promise with Tesla's FSD, end quote. What Dar described to me, he wants to become the Visa MasterCard of mobility. Plug in and take a swipe fee. But this time you take a network fee.
Well, I think it's important to sort of look at what he's saying and also look at what they're doing and do they line up, right? There's been a lot of press over the past few years about them actually partnering with taxi companies, Flywheel in San Francisco, Curb in New York City, a bunch in Europe. And so I think what he's saying lines up with what they're actually doing. Doesn't, might seem a little strange, that Uber is partnering with taxi companies, but like if they're going towards that model of Visa MasterCard of mobility, you could get a taxi, you could get an Uber, You could get an AV. I think what they're doing lines up with what he's saying. So I buy it. And I think strategically, it does make a lot of sense. Who knows? Like literally anytime anyone talks about AV, they're like, well, we don't know if or when this is going to happen, right? There's all these caveats. So it's like, if I'm Uber, let everyone else figure that out. Okay. We've got the great network. There's a lot. And this is sort of where I go back to, I think a lot of the kind of operations piece of a rideshare company, Tesla could figure out, but like Uber already has it dialed in. Tolls, for example, like reimbursement of tolls at airports, especially on the East Coast where every freaking highway is a toll road, stuff like this, right? Just like building those systems out, right? Like where Tesla could go and build that, but like Uber already has that. That's just one of dozens of things that they kind of already have that they're constantly improving on. And I think I see people kind of poke fun at tech companies like, oh, why do you need so many people to run an app? But like, I think that is one thing. Like Uber, I think some of their investors have complained that they're wasting a lot of money and have too many people. And maybe some of that is true, but like the company is operating globally. So they need apps in different languages. There are different legal, insurance, local requirements in all of these jurisdictions. Like sometimes you can't, AI can't do all of this, right? You just need a lot of people sometimes to figure this out, to deal with issues pop up. And so I think like that, I don't know that it's like a pure moat that no one can ever penetrate, but it definitely gives them a big head start, gives them a big leg up. And so again, it kind of comes back to, if I'm Tesla, do I want to go and do all that? Or do I want kind of maybe be 5% better than Uber, but it'll take 10 years? Or do I kind of want to just plug and play? And so I guess I don't know that it's in Tesla or Elon's personality to partner with Uber, but I do see from like a business strategy point of view, I think it would make sense, what Dara is saying. And then I think maybe eventually they kind of like pivot to something on their own, or they kind of do it with Uber and their own. But I think that to me, it kind of depends on the vision or the goals of Tesla, I guess I would say, right? And I have no idea. And so I'm just kind of like looking at it from the outside. But I do think the fact that Tesla has, I'm guessing, millions of vehicles out there on the road, if or when full self-driving can just be software updated to all of those cars and it works 100% and is approved by regulators, that's the big if. And maybe we won't get into that on this podcast, but if or when that does happen, I do think you have like now variable supply. You have a bunch of people out there, right? Some of whom are probably more like Uber drivers with Teslas, and they're going to go out and drive 40, 50, 60 hours a week, or they're going to put their car, on the network 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Maybe that works well. They buy a few more. And then you're going to have a bunch of people, maybe more like me, who are like, I don't want my Tesla on the app, 40 hours a week because it'll get all beat up. But, it would be nice to do 5-10 hours a week, and that covers my monthly payment. And it's like in that times when I would never need it, maybe I like it and I do it a little bit more. So you kind of have the dynamics that I think would lend itself really well to a rideshare company. Open the Tesla app, call for a ride. Like, hey, I think if Tesla won't really wanted to go that route and invest a ton into things, then I think they could make it work and be a potential competitor. Like on paper, I think they could be a potential competitor to Uber. Like Waymo doesn't make sense to me, but if Tesla wanted to go that route, I think they could.
Waymo's fleet's too small to compete.
Well, Waymo's fleet is too small, and I think the key is scaling it up would be very expensive, because you scale it up. Okay, let's say you scale it up so you can now do an equal number of 1 million trips a week in Los Angeles, maybe if that's what Uber is doing, for example. But how do you serve demand at peak? What do you do with all your car? I just feel like dynamically, like we sort of know from the transportation industry going back the past 100 years. I interviewed a professor from Columbia, Len Sherman, on my podcast a few years ago, and we talked about like 100 years ago, the New York City transportation market for livery. It was like the wild, wild west. Anyone and everyone could start a gypsy cab, and no one was making any money. It really wasn't until they limited the number of providers. And so now demand was a lot higher than supply. So they could sort of charge a lot more during peak. And so I think that was kind of why we got the whole Uber situation recently, because they probably since 100 years ago didn't change that number, the 13,000 TLC license, or, the taxi licenses. But so I think with Tesla, I think it is interesting because they have already millions of cars on the road, and maybe it's a software upgrade, maybe it's the new models that start rolling out, maybe it's a hardware add-on that they need that gets that full self-driving working 100% of the time. But I kind of imagine the similar parts to Waymo would be like in the domain operation. Maybe there's certain trips that Tesla can do really well at the start. I'm not taking a Tesla. I don't know. I think it'd be Tesla fans are great, but I don't know if they're opening a Tesla app for only going from LA, the beach to West Hollywood to Santa Monica. But if I want to go airport, if I want to go downtown, then I got to go back to the Uber app. I think that would be like very fractionally limiting. So again, like it might make sense for Tesla to partner with Uber at the start, get kind of a lot of learnings and lessons. And then when they get to a certain inflection point, start working on their own tech and launch. So I think that could be an interesting strategy too.
They're working on their own tech. The hybrid strategy is very interesting. My concern from studying Tesla is Tesla's not going to like the economics. They're not going to like giving up any of the control to that. The question is, how do you see Uber pricing these deals? Waymo's there in Phoenix. Motional was on there in Santa Monica for Uber Eats until they closed down pretty much the other day. How do the economics work? Is Uber taking a cut of the fare? Are they taking a flat fee? Any insight into the economics of how these platform deals work with Uber?
Sure. No, that's a good question because I mean, typically right now, drivers capture about 70% of what passengers pay. And so if you go and ask drivers or survey drivers, this is the number one issue they have, or probably top 2 or 3 issue they have is the take rate. The perceived take rate is actually much higher. Most drivers think, like when we survey drivers, they think it's 50%, 60%, 70%, because there are individual trips, high surge trips, long trips where Uber now takes a much higher cut of those fares. And then on the shorter trips, they take a much lower cut or even maybe sometimes negative. But the average might be more in that 30% ballpark, and that covers everything. And so I think that obviously if right now drivers are getting, let's even say conservatively, 60 to 70% of every trip, as soon as you get rid of the driver, who gets that money, right? That is actually extra margin. So that's always been the allure of self-driving. But, you know, kind of what I would argue is that right now, like drivers aren't making a whole lot. Expenses and inflation have really popped up. The standard mileage deduction is 67 cents per mile. A full-time driver is doing 1,000 miles per week. So if you make $1,000, it's sort of like saying your expenses are $670. Now that's pretty conservative, but I would say that maybe it's half of that, right? So like let's say of a driver's earnings, if expenses are like 30 to 40% or 30 to 50%, now the margin, it's not like Uber now or the self-driving companies would get to keep all that additional margin. There's some in between. And then let's also take into account that like, hey, with Waymo, the tech is very expensive. So like, I guess I'm personally, and I think this is still like a longer, you know, this will be a longer tail kind of decision or conversation or learnings, but like, is that all that extra tech and everything that they're adding on and the R&D, eventually they have to make all that money off. Is it enough to offset that delta of replacing a human driver? I'm personally, I don't know. I'm not really, not that I'm not convinced. I just think it's a very long break-even period. And so I feel like that's probably a good business school case study or analysis for someone smarter than me. But on the surface, like I'm not convinced. I think with Tesla, it's a much cheaper product. So like if or when they can kind of get to that technology level, right, and then plug in, maybe the numbers are more attractive. I guess I would say to answer your question more succinctly, like maybe they get to keep right now on passenger pays $10, Uber keeps $3 and pays for everything and driver gets $7. Maybe there's like $1, $2, $3 of extra margin that can be captured there and divvied up between Uber and a fleet provider. And kind of like you said, right? If you're partnering with Uber, they're probably going to be more aggressive on that. Like they're probably going to say, hey, we want half of that or more of that margin. So I think maybe Uber likes this because it's a way for them to make more money. But if you're just going to be a fleet provider for Uber, like history would really tell us that like, hey, you can do well and you can make some money, but you're not going to be Uber. You're going to be a fraction of Uber.
Just look at Lyft. They're a fraction. I'm surprised they still survive, but where does Lyft go?
They're still kicking. You know, I will say that like one thing to me that again, right, like if you just tracked Uber and Lyft stock price, if you just looked at the kind of observations and media stories about the companies, like you would have thought Lyft was dead a long time ago. But you can still go out in any major city or even minor city and call a Lyft. I think the ETAs are pretty comparable. I think the pricing, honestly, I think Lyft is cheaper, more, it just seems like they're cheaper more often than Uber. So like you would never know that maybe it's like, oh, okay, Uber's a little more reliable, a little better product, but like, hey, if you are cost conscious, like it's not much work to type your destination into Lyft, Uber, see which one's cheaper, call a ride on both, see what kind of car you get and take the better option. Like it's not a lot of extra work to save $70, you know, like going to the airport. I would do that for $20, right? It's kind of like, it's like a fun little game too. So I guess to me, like that's kind of, you know, on investor calls that I've done with public market investors, that's always been one thing that I don't know what it means, but I've always highlighted that like, hey, from an investor perspective, it seems like Lyft is dead. Look at the stock price compared to Uber, but market share compared to Uber. It's 2/3, 1/3, but like the stock price is a lot different, much higher stock price comparison, right? Like Uber might be 10 to 1, Uber to Lyft, but like market share, it's like, 2/3, 1/3, right? So I don't know. Something doesn't quite add up there. And I think that Lyft is sort of relegated now to be this second player. But I guess as long as they can kind of continue as is, I feel like they should be able to make a decent little business out of being that number 2 player. If Uber's doing 9 million trips a day, hey, maybe Lyft does 3 million at $20 a trip. That's $60 million in revenue per day. And they figure out how to take a good margin on that and make some money, millions of dollars a day.
What if Tesla bought Lyft and built their ride-hailing network on the back of their tech and started to phase out non-Tesla vehicles and make it all Tesla vehicles? They've got the cash and they've got the credit to do it. And they got the cojones. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, I like that idea. And I think that on the surface, I think that, the kind of numbers, I think I see Lyft here at about $7 billion of market cap and Tesla at 557 billion of market caps. I think it would just be a little blip on their radar, 557 versus 7. I actually like that idea a lot. I don't know that I've heard anyone quite propose it to me yet, but I think that it would kind of, that initial, I think that initially Tesla is going to have to get some vehicles on a big platform like Uber or Lyft, right? I think that it will just, they'll get so many learnings, they'll get so much experience, it'll be so much easier. And then maybe in parallel, they start testing some things on their own app. And so I think to cut out the middleman, why not do it with Lyft? Maybe if I'm being really strategic, I might partner with both Uber and Lyft, sort of see how it goes. And then at a certain point, 1-2 years in, I make the decision to buy Lyft and put all my cars on Lyft. And maybe Uber is like, hey, you got to get off now. Or maybe they let you stay on, who knows? But I think that you would get value out of kind of doing both and then swallowing up Lyft. But I do feel like, that to me, people always ask me can Lyft ever catch Uber? And I'm like, no way. Right. But to me, I'm looking for I'm always interested in step function changes when it comes to rideshare demand, when it comes to rideshare operations. And so plugging in Tesla vehicles onto Lyft, especially if they're full self-driving, that to me would seem like a game changer. That is a really compelling reason to take Lyft, right? Hey, we're going to be eventually a fleet of all Teslas, right? Kind of like how we just talked about. Every driver on Lyft needs a Tesla. I think they could do some really interesting marketing and kind of just product. Because honestly, this is free consulting right now for Tesla, I guess, but this is a good brainstorm. One complaint we've obviously heard about Uber is that the product is so inconsistent these days. We had the CEO of Alto, Will Coleman. He's been on my podcast a number of times. They have sort of an elevated rideshare experience, kind of like an Uber Black competitor. They use employee drivers. And the big pitch there, kind of like a McDonald's, is that their product is very consistent. It's all the same cars. The drivers are trained. They know where to go. They know what to do. You may not love their vehicles. I don't personally love a 7-seat SUV Buick, and that's what some of their fleet is composed of. But it is, if you do like that car, you're going to get it every time, or you're going to get a Volkswagen Atlas 7-seater. You're basically getting the same car every single time. And so I think that consistent experience is really valuable. You get into an Uber these days and you might get a piece of crap. You might, especially if you're taking it internationally in Mexico City, some of the Ubers have holes in the floors of the car. And I think that's one complaint, the quality of the drivers, right? Which could potentially be addressed by full self-driving. That hey, the quality of the driver is now going to be really consistent. The quality of the vehicle is going to be really consistent. The Tesla product, you get a Tesla every time. People love Teslas. It's a nice car, especially compared on maybe in the future. That is one thing I would say, for a rideshare vehicle, I say Teslas are nice and they're comfy, but I think they could be better. I think they could be a little more comfy in the back seat. They could be a little higher quality. So maybe that's a product pathway that I would start to explore right now. How do we make a little bit more of a luxury model? Not even luxurious, but something that could take a little more wear and tear. People getting in and out, people sitting for an hour, sitting in the back of a Tesla Model 3, it's a little bit low on the legroom, for example, which is surprising, right? Because it's such a spacious car and it has all this, the front, and it has storage and it has under storage in the trunk. So it's maybe finding ways to add a little bit more passenger experience, maybe not driver experience, because there's not going to be a driver, but a little bit more comfy experience for the driver. And I guess if you can move the seats all the way up in the front, that does make it better for the passenger. But yeah, I think I like this idea of Tesla buying Lyft. I think it could be pretty interesting.
I'm going to make this even more interesting. I've been talking a lot about this. I did a YouTube short on this about a Tesla subscription service. They're no longer going to sell you the vehicle, no longer going to lease it. You do a subscription. So it's going to bundle your insurance. It's going to bundle FSD. It's going to bundle your lease payment. But now if you buy Lyft, you bundle unlimited Lyft rides on the Tesla network. You want to talk about delivering a blow to Uber stock price? If you subscribe to a Model 3 or a Model Y or an X and you're part of the sexy family, you get unlimited rides. They just developed their own version of Amazon Prime.
You put your car on the platform. Every ride you put your car on the platform, you get a ride back, or 75% or 100, something like that. You do a ride, you get a ride, something like that. There's cool companies right now that are doing things like teledriving. So I could even imagine like, hey, maybe, you use your Tesla, you get in, it takes you wherever you want to go, and then you put it on the network. You know what I mean? There's a lot of, I think, variations you can do off of that. I think one thing that we have seen that bundles have not worked great in the kind of mobility space and rideshare space yet. I don't know that it's been a big focus for Uber. They've got this Uber One membership program. You would think that like on paper, they've got Uber, right? They've got rides, which is kind of like their moneymaker. They have Uber Eats, which is sort of like their loser. They lose money on those, but it's high frequency. You got to eat 3 times a day or more. Whereas like with rideshare, if you get, most people have a car, so it's like Friday, Saturday night, or when they travel, it's less frequent. And then grocery hasn't like really like, I don't think about Uber Eats when I go to grocery. I think more Instacart, to be perfectly honest, because it's like different types, the type of driver who would do Instacart. Like you got to communicate with, your customer. Oh, that's out. I got to shop and then I got to deliver. That's not quite the food delivery driver persona. And it's not the rideshare driver persona. And so I think those synergies are a bit more limited. And so I guess my point is like, no one's really figured out like a super compelling bundle. Like no one is like, hey, you would think that Uber should have some bundle where it's like, I should never order from DoorDash, right? Like I should just take Uber. I should just do Uber Eats. But like I do Uber Lyft all the time. I do Uber Eats. I do DoorDash. I'll look at Grubhub. I'll go pick up. I'll go out. They haven't quite figured out the bundle. And so I imagine that it's it hasn't been a big priority yet, but also B, maybe the bundle isn't as compelling as it sounds on paper.
It's compelling. Look at Amazon Prime. And at some point, mark my words, Amazon's going to do a Prime mobility tier where they're going to integrate Zoox.
Well, I think Amazon Prime is kind of a good example, actually. I buy all my consumer crap on Amazon, yes, but like I like Prime Video. I got Prime Video. I got Netflix. I got Apple TV. If I had to pick one, it wouldn't be Prime Video. I might pick Apple or Netflix way ahead of Prime Video. And so I think when you kind of go into these adjacent categories, there's some synergy and crossover, but like maybe it's not as good as it sounds on paper, and you really have to focus. I think Uber, honestly, I haven't seen them test like a super compelling offer when it comes to bundle. And so I think that's an opportunity that they could tap into in the future, but maybe they've got other priorities. They have other priorities, I'm guessing, than on their product roadmap right now.
Prime's killer app, we can all agree with it, is delivery. The killer app, hands down, is delivery. Prime Video, it's okay. There's actually some decent stuff on there I find, but my economic hat on there, it's a cash cow. The amount of advertising revenue, we're talking billions a quarter that spits off. Well, you might not watch it, but Amazon's making money on it. Paramount can't figure out how to make money on streaming. Amazon can.
I think this is something I chatted about when I had Emil Michael from Uber. We talked about Instacart's S1, and basically they were kind of like a break-even company with an advertising business on top, right? So Uber, I think, has a big, they've kind of been highlighting the past few quarters all the money they're making off of advertising. I think on the delivery side, they've got a lot of advertising opportunity, and on the rideshare, it's like their moneymaker. Then if they can figure out how to advertise on top of that, it's like, hey, that's a good little business too. Overall, I'm kind of bullish on the opportunity with Uber going forward, AVs, someone like Tesla going forward. I guess I like Uber and Tesla a lot right now. I think they both have a lot of interesting opportunities going in the future.
They do. The future is going to be interesting. In your opinion, what does the future of ride sharing look like?
I think the future of rideshare is going to continue kind of as is. I think the biggest things that I'm looking to in the future are sort of these AV fleets coming onto the platform. I think that is going to cause a lot of commotion. And then I think the other thing that I think is a little longer out is the crop of 16-year-olds right now that are not getting their license anymore. And I think that we will see a lot more people. Right now, most families own like 2.3 or 2.4 cars, I think is the national average, something kind of ridiculous. And in the future, I think it's really hard to get someone who already owns a car, who already has a lot of these embedded costs, to switch to Uber, to switch to a bicycle and Uber and car rental rental and car share and things like that. But I do think you have a lot of these like new generation. Like I have a half sister who's 16 or 17 and she didn't get her license, right? Like a lot of these new generations are not going to be getting their license. And I think they will be like, she's already riding Uber, even though it's technically against their terms of service. A lot of these new generation, I think, will be relying more on Uber. They might get an e-bike, right? E-bike's like the number one selling electric vehicle in America last year, not Tesla, sorry, Elon, and car sharing and, kind of like scooter share, all of these other modes. I think those are kind of like the two interesting things that I think will have a big potential impact on the rideshare market in the future. And I think honestly, both are pretty positive for the industry as a whole.
The industry is doing well. The higher insurance goes, the more people are going to dump cars and go into rideshare at the end of the day. Young consumers don't want to pay it. Auto insurance is another ripoff. You really look at the market, it is truly a ripoff for what you get for it. But that's a whole conversation for another day with our friend Ed Walker. We go on about insurance with him.
Yeah, there you go. He's the guy.
He is the insurance guy. See, we got the rideshare guy, then we got the insurance guy. Harry, for today, what would you like our listeners and viewers to take away with them today?
We touched on a lot of great topics, and honestly, one of the reasons why I wanted to come on was to flesh out a few. So I appreciate the discussion. If folks, I'm pretty easy to find on the internet, but if they're a podcast fan, they can go type in the Rideshare Guy and check out my weekly podcast interview that I tend to do on more industry topics around mobility. And then, of course, we've got a lot of content on our website and YouTube channel that's more geared towards individual drivers, but you can still learn a lot from. And I'll be active on Twitter, tweeting at Elon. Maybe you can hire me one day.
You can learn a lot from Harry. I learned a lot. I even bought him lunch when his book came out of Italy in LA, and I read his book, and I was very proud of that.
Appreciate it. Well, maybe next time I'll get the Polo Lounge for my next book.
You're very welcome. I could do that for you. Let's get you on the New York Times bestseller list. If you're interested in ride sharing, I highly recommend you check out the Rideshare Guy. I read on a regular basis. I learn a lot. Your colleague Sergio does that really funny show about the ins and outs of ride shares.
Show me the money club. Yeah, good and bad. Prep yourself.
It's interesting. It's very interesting, but it's very informative. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is platforms.